There's not that many. There's not that many right now in the shrine room, but it feels nice. And I know there's quite a few of you online there. So, hello. There's more now coming in. Fantastic. What we're going to do is first just pay our respect to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then we'll just chant the repetition, the precepts. We can do that here in the shrine room in unison, and at home on Zoom, you're muted, but just do join in. So this is important response, right? Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Namo Yeah, that's the thing. When we chant, it's good to have a mask on. That's still the. Otherwise, just chant quietly. So the repetition precepts together. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata verani sekaparam samadhyami. Atvinadana verani sekaparam samadhyami. Amesu mechachara verani sekaparam samadhyami. Musavara verani sekaparam samadhyami. Suramarya macha pamartana verani sekaparam samadhyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify. With open-handed generosity, I purify my body. With stillness, simplicity, and contentment, I purify my body. With truthful communication, I purify. With mindfulness clear and radiant, I purify my mind. So tonight,
Hey, Masiri, we just need you turning up again a little bit, sorry, just before you start.
all right, I'm just doing it. Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Great, thanks.
I can't see that. Okay. Now, I just say a little bit about the format of tonight, because what we're going to have before the tea break is Vajradevi giving us her wisdom, really. She's going to talk for a while. I'll introduce her first.
Okay, so I'm going to talk probably for about 35-40 minutes before the break. And I want to tell you a little bit about the book, but largely what that involves is talking about a particular way of practicing that, which is what the book's about. It's about a particular way of practicing mindfulness. It's a particular approach to the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha's primary teaching on mindfulness. Sorry, I've just realized that I can banish my own full view. So I'm going to do that. It's a little bit weird just looking at a big picture of yourself when there are lots of other people here. Okay, yeah, so particular approach to Satipatthana, of which there are many, many ways of practicing Satipatthana. So this is just one, but it has particular features, and I'm going to highlight those just right from the beginning. So it's receptive. It emphasizes being receptive to what's happening in experience rather than actively directing the mind much of the time. It's more a sort of sense of what's the mind naturally doing. So there's that quality of receptivity. It's also an approach that emphasizes wisdom and clear seeing. And towards the end of what I'm talking about, I'm going to just make that distinction between being mindful and being mindful with wisdom. And the Buddha, the word for mindfulness, sati, you're probably very familiar with, and then mindfulness and wisdom, satipanya, awareness plus wisdom. But that's a bit later. And also, before I get into the main body of what I want to talk about, is just say a couple of ways in which this practice, where we can locate it within our Triratna practices and frames of reference. So the first way, it's very simple. It's a practice that it's more in tune with just sitting than it is with the mindfulness of breathing or metta bhavana. So just sitting has that receptive element to it. And Bhante said to Subhuti when he was introducing him to the practice, he famously said, when you're just sitting, you just sit. That's it. So what I'm going to say is a little bit more, has a few more pointers than that. And that's partly because I think the Satipatthana Sutta is a bit of a map. It's a bit of a map of the mind. And it can be helpful to locate things within that map. So the other place where I think this practice intersects with our Triratna context is in the mandala of practice, the 5 aspects, within the mandala, which don't worry if you're not familiar with that. But for those of you that are, we've got the aspect of integration and positive emotion, two different aspects. And then we've got spiritual receptivity. And that's in the center. And yeah, I'd say the method of this practice is to do with spiritual receptivity. Then we've got spiritual rebirth, and then we've got spiritual death. And spiritual death is otherwise known as insight. So if we've got spiritual receptivity as the method, we've got spiritual death or insight as where we're going, where the practice is hopefully taking us via a receptive route. Okay, so I'm going to say 4 things about mindfulness, about right mindfulness particularly. And right mindfulness is how the Buddha defined mindfulness at its most developed, and right mindfulness, of course, as part of the Noble Eightfold Path. And within right mindfulness, I think there are different qualities of mind, but it's predominantly mindfulness or awareness and wisdom factors of mind. And I'm drawing on the 2nd chapter in the book, so chapter 2. Those of you that have been on retreat with me, these factors will probably be quite familiar. But I'm not going to particularly do them in the by using the Pali terms. So I'm just going to start with a little phrase for each one. So firstly, very, very simple. Mindfulness always happens in the present moment. And you can tune in as I speak, and maybe through the session, just when you remember, tune into simply knowing what's happening in the body, in the mind, through your senses, without trying to change anything, without trying to be aware of anything in particular. It's not a practice of staying with one object, like the breath or the sitting bones. They may be things that you notice when you become aware of your experience in the moment. But actually, we can be aware of anything. Whatever, wherever your attention goes, awareness can follow. Just being present with what's happening, without trying to interfere with it, try and make the breath a bit better, or try and feel something different to what we're actually feeling. It's very simple, just being with what's happening. In a relaxed way, a way that feels spacious and natural, and quite open. It's quite an open, broad awareness in the present moment. So that's the first thing about right mindfulness, always happening in the present moment. The second thing is that the quality of energy or effort we use is crucial. And I would say that we need to use the minimum effort that we can and still be present. So that's the criteria, if you like. Can we still be present? And how much energy does that take? How much effort does that take? It's easy to use a lot of energy or effort in practice and in life without necessarily calibrating whether it's what's needed in relation to the task, to what we're doing. And with mindfulness, especially when we're watching the mind, and this is essentially a practice of watching what's happening in the mind and through the mind, all through the other senses, the physical senses and the body. But it really includes the thoughts and feelings and images, what's happening in the mind. And if we go at that with a lot of effort, a lot of energy, then we're sort of using a sledgehammer with something that's quite sensitive and quite subtle, and we scare it off. We scare off what's in the mind, or we overrun it or override it. So again, that receptivity helps us pay attention to the quality of energy and effort that's being used. And often where that energy and effort come in, they come in through reminding ourselves to be present, or remembering to be in the present moment. So that sense of maybe even checking, am I present? That's the sort of quality of energy or quality of effort that can be really, really helpful. There's a bit in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says, we're mindful to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. So that gives us some more pointers to the type of energy or effort that's needed. To the extent necessary for bare knowledge, to just know what's happening, and a continuity of mindfulness. So some of the words that are used to talk about this sort of effort, this quality of effort, are things like patiently persevering or patiently persisting, so that there's a degree of steadiness in the mind that's aware. So we haven't got too much shoving, giving it our all, really sort of pushing, and then a slight sort of lapse. So we stay very sort of steady with the quality of attending, so that we can notice more and more moments of mindfulness, or be present more and more moments. So those words like patience and steadiness, in a way, that they also convey to me that sense of receptivity. We're less concerned about getting somewhere, about a result, than we are about what's needed to simply maintain an awareness in the present moment. So this quality of energy or effort is the backup, if you like, to that first quality of mindfulness happening in the present moment. It supports it. It's there to not take over, but to really back up what's going to be helpful to being aware in the present moment. And because it's receptive and because it's broad, it helps us see more. It helps the mind take in more of what's happening through the different senses, including the mind sense. And maybe you could try this out if you like. We could do a little try out of this through using the visual sense. So you might not want to look at the screen as you do this, but you could do. So if you let your eyes be quite soft, and maybe look down if it's helpful, but let the eyes be quite soft. Gaze feel quite open, and almost let the eyes relax back into the head. Often with the visual sense, we can really feel ourselves reaching out towards what's being seen. But let the eyes be soft. You might notice that reaching out, but you also might notice a dropping back. Even the visual sense perhaps getting a little bit blurry, out of focus. And then perhaps just put a little bit more attention onto the peripheral vision. Notice what you can see without straining. It's almost like looking out of the corner of the mind's eye. Then you can really get a sense of that breadth. Okay, so you can let that go, but you can contact that feeling sometimes if you want to connect with the quality of energy or effort that's needed. Think of that broad, soft, open quality of mind that can see around corners. So one aspect of right use of energy or effort here is, I mentioned, was consistency and continuity of awareness. And Bhante, he says of this, he says a consistent practice of mindfulness outside of meditation will do far more to overcome hindrances than anything we do once we get on the cushion. So what we are looking to do with this practice is not simply be aware in formal times of formal meditation, but to have some connection with our being aware of our experience throughout our day. And of course, there's going to be times when we're not at all aware. But over time, we develop the habit of remembering, of coming back to awareness. And what Bhante is pointing to here is that means that we are aware at quite an early stage. The more awareness that's there, the sooner we're aware of when hindrances or when klesha, defilements in the mind arise. And so we're able to notice them earlier and sooner and have them arise less strongly over time. With a lack of continuity, it's a bit like a light bulb that's not quite screwed in right. So you get a flickering on and off. So you can't actually really see what's around you because most of the time you're in the dark. So that's the moments of unawareness when we can't really see very clearly what's happening. And what we're looking to do is have more and more moments of awareness, of light in the mind. One thing about the mind which can sometimes cast a bit of doubt on maybe it's easy to think, oh, I can't be aware under this circumstance, or I can't be aware when that's happening. Maybe when there's a lot happening or when things are happening very fast. And so I just got a little story here of recounted by a friend of mine, and it's when we both spent quite a long time on retreat in Myanmar, in Burma, and retreat centers there are very loud. There's often a lot of building work going on, so it's quite different to our idea of retreat, where usually we try and create conditions that it's quite quiet, it's quite peaceful. But here, because there's the idea that any object is a meditation object. Actually, anything can be going on. So my friend, this was tested a bit for her. She was meditating, and outside the open window, she was sitting next to the window, sitting in the shrine room. Outside, there was someone using what I've been calling a jackhammer, but actually I think it's called a pneumatic drill. I think that's more what it is. I don't really know what a jackhammer is, but what I mean is a pneumatic drill. And he was going for it outside the window. So there was this dun, 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 dun. And she said she sat there for an hour, and she said, I don't think I missed a single sort of strike of this drill hitting the concrete that it was going through. I was very impressed. And what she was doing was she was using that sound that was dominant in her experience. She was using it to build awareness, to grow awareness. So she wasn't resisting it as something that was disturbing her meditation or her mind, but this is what's happening right now. What's that like? What's that like? Paying attention to it. What's the experience like? So there's that sense of that we can pay attention to whatever's happening, and there's also the fact that pneumatic drills. That the sound changes a lot, doesn't it? It's going back and forth, but it's very quick. And what that says to me is, in a way, we when we think that things go too fast, we perhaps are not that aware about how fast the mind can go, especially if we're not trying to catch each sound or each movement, but we're really relaxed and open to them arising. And then it's almost effortless for the mind, as long as we're present, to pick up what's happening. One last thing about this particular strand of right mindfulness to do with effort is that it's really helpful when we have some interest and emotional engagement, some curiosity and enthusiasm. And that may not be with what's happening. It may not be with the objects in experience. Sometimes when they're novel, like the pneumatic drill, there may be interest, but really the interest is in the whole picture. And a lot of that picture is how is the mind relating to what's happening. So it's much more about what's the quality of awareness like. Is there some contraction around this particular object in relation to this particular experience? Or can the mind be sort of quite open and curious still about what's happening? So for me, there's a sense almost here of feeling into the quality of mind, feeling into the awareness, rather than it being anything that we do or try to do. It's like connecting with the moment, connecting with what's happening in the experience. Okay, so that's the second one. So I'll probably say a bit less about the third and the fourth. I've already slightly moved on to the third one, which is to do with acceptance. So Bhante famously said, awareness is revolutionary, and completely agree. And I also think that acceptance is revolutionary in its own way. I think a real acceptance of what is happening brings a lot of peace and contentment and happiness to the mind. I think acceptance is a wisdom quality. It's not a passivity, but it is a willingness to be with what's happening, an emotional sort of willingness, even when we don't want it to be happening. Whatever it is, we find it unpleasant, we find it difficult. A sense of not resisting what's happening. And in the book, at the end of each chapter, I have what I've called mindful life moments. And these are when I write about how I work with the practice. So that I hopefully give a sense of how the reader can work with their own sort of mind within the practice. And one of the, I think it's chapter 4, I talk about a particularly, well, or just to say as well, these are drawn from my blog. I have a blog that I've written for the last 5 or 6 years. And so I write about things that arise in my life and in my practice. so the mindful life moment at the end of chapter 4 is to do with a visit to the dentist for implant surgery, which I haven't had before. I'd only had this one experience. And I wasn't looking forward to it. I was quite, I noticed during the day there were thoughts and feelings of, that I wasn't looking forward to it. There was some sort of resistance to it. It was going to take quite a long time, and it was in the evening, so I had all day to think about it. So I really wanted to prepare my mind. So I did that just by being present. I'd been present to what was happening, watching this quality of when there was resistance, when there was fear in the mind, and just working with accepting those things as happening. These are what's happening right now. Am I willing to be with them? And when it came to the surgery, when he was drilling into the bone, the jawbone, because that's what they do, because the tooth is no longer there. And there were lots of sensations, and my mouth was open for a very long time. I was massaging my jaw to stop the cramp. Actually, it was really interesting. I can genuinely say it was really an interesting experience. Going between watching what was happening in the mind, any reactions in the mind, any acceptance in the mind, and the various different sensations, different sights, everything else that was happening. It could all be known. It could all be known as it was happening. And in many ways, that's not a large thing to accept. You know, it's quite a small thing in the grand scheme of things. But I think those small moments of acceptance allow us to build capacity for other experiences that are unwanted or difficult. So I think, again, we're growing the capacity for awareness, and we're growing the capacity to accept the experience as it is. And especially when there are just things that need to be accepted in the moment. It's not that we don't necessarily do what we can. I get quite a lot of migraines, and I sometimes take medication for that because that's what's needed. So we do what's needed, but actually we work with the non-acceptance of what's happening. There's actually no, I won't say that. So that's the third thing: acceptance of what is happening. And then the fourth thing is to do with noticing experiences as experiences, or clearly knowing experience as experience. What we often do, or what are, in a way, the ignorance or delusion that's one of the main sort of forces in our being. What that usually does is personalize what's happening. That's what we've been doing since we were very young. So we have very strong sort of streams in the mind body and streams of conditioning around, rather than experience being simply experience. We concretize and personalize things as to my experience, my pain in the body, or these thoughts that I'm having, that either they might say that I'm great, they might say that I'm awful, they might like or not like what's happening. But that sort of personal relation is always being sort of strengthened, if you like, by ignorance, by delusion in the mind. And what we look to do when awareness is working with some degree of wisdom is to recognize that delusion as it happens. Recognize those personalizing moments. Recognize, I'm doing this, recognize how they may contract. You may feel some contraction in the body or in the mind, rather than a more sort of open, letting experience just be experience. And the quality that brings this about is called clearly knowing. Hello. Bhante talks about clearly knowing as having a touch of insight about it, knowing more clearly. And there's a Dharma teacher called Steve Armstrong who talks about clear knowing as unentangled knowing. Unentangled from wrong views, particularly wrong view of a fixed self that owns experiences and identifies with experiences. So we're training the mind, if you like, in how to relate to experience simply as experience. So this is where the wisdom, mindfulness or mindfulness with wisdom comes in more strongly again. And the Buddha had an image for this particular relationship between mindfulness and wisdom. And he used the image, well, he used the elephant. It wasn't just an image, because I think there were quite a lot of elephants running around the Indian jungles 2,500 years ago. So he said that the neck of the elephant, he compared that to sati, to awareness. And the head of the elephant was panya, or wisdom. So the neck supports the head in the same way that awareness, mindfulness supports the coming into being of wisdom. So there's that relationship going on. So with mindfulness, awareness, we are setting up some of the conditions needed to support wisdom. But there is a little bit more of that, because some of these qualities of mindfulness, as I've said, they already have wisdom perspective in them. So I'll maybe just give a couple of examples of that, and you, to the extent that you can, just tune into what I'm saying and see if you want to try it out. Might not quite be enough time. Okay, so maybe using the visual faculty again. So when we are mindful, we can be aware of looking at something, of seeing something, aware of colors, shapes, and we usually, perception does its job, so we're aware, there's a label, we're aware of what we're looking at. So all that is in the territory of sati, of mindfulness. And then when mindfulness and wisdom, with wisdom is there can be just another element. And I think there are many different ways that the wisdom perspective manifests, to a smaller or a greater degree, a bit like facets of a crystal or a jewel. So one facet might be, along with the colors and shapes and the concepts, we're aware that seeing is happening. We're aware of that mental process in the mind, and we're aware of the nature of the experience. It's like we're a little bit further back in the perceptual realm, noticing that seeing is happening. Okay, another example. So we can be mindful perhaps of sensations in the body, touching, tingling, coolness or warmth, temperature. Can be aware of all those things. When we're mindful with panya, with some degree of right view or wisdom, we can also be aware of how we're relating to those sensations. Perhaps there's some discomfort, so what we can also be aware of is some degree of disliking or aversion in the mind. And that then also becomes another experience to be known. Can talk about them as objects of experience. So as well as the discomfort in the knee, the different sensations there, we're also aware of the mind's relationship to experience. So how we know makes all the difference. And there's a couple of chapters in the book that go into, well, chapter 4 goes into right view, both the theory and practical ways of working, if you like, with training in right view, training in setting up a Dharma perspective in the mind. And that helps us recognize the more sort of conditioned perspectives that are already going on in the mind. We're always coming from some sort of view, always some sort of perspective, some sort of view. And so we're training to be able to recognize those more conditioned perspectives from the point of view of right view, how the Buddha would have thought. So the other chapter that focuses on wisdom is chapter 7, when we look at wisdom and delusion, because it's really important to be able to recognize those, how delusion is working in the mind. It's a bit like amniotic fluid, where we're really sort of wrapped up in it or covered in it. So being able to sort of see how that manifests, quite small moments. Chapter 5 is a bit related to the subtitle of the book. It's called Ending Suffering Through Attention, Curiosity and Wisdom. And this points to how the Buddha's teachings, the whole of the Buddha's teachings, are directed towards ending suffering, towards ending dukkha. So chapter 5 is the biggest chapter in the book. It's a mammoth chapter. I have tried to break it up a little bit, but it's called The Cycle of Suffering. So it is looking into dukkha, but it's also looking into the main culprits that give us all the trouble, which are craving and aversion. So each chapter has a link to a recorded meditation, and each chapter also has 1 or 2 exercises that help unpack what's in the book, what's in the main body of the chapter. And then, as I said, we've got these mindful life moments that are really sort of stories of how I work with the practice. Yeah, I could tell you about the title, but maybe that's take a few minutes, so maybe let's leave that until later. And let's leave it there. I'm going to hand back to Khemasiri for a few minutes, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll come back and I'll lead us in a meditation.
Thank you, Vajradevi. Yeah, we have just a few announcements before.
Lovely. Okay, if you'd like to set yourself up in a way that's comfortable for meditation, I'm just going to mute myself while I turn my computer around to face the shrine, otherwise it gets a bit noisy. Okay, so we'll have a little bit under a half hour, I think, to meditate, and I'll lead you into it, or mostly through it. But maybe starting with your eyes open, as we did before. practicing at least sometimes with the eyes open is really helpful if you want to develop a continuity of awareness. It gives us some practice in being aware while either not meditating or sleeping. So we can have that continuity of knowing that seeing is happening, and of letting the gaze be quite soft and interior. And it can be a very nice and natural bridge from doing other things, from chatting and drinking tea, to coming into meditation. If we just settling back, settling into the posture, but just wait until you feel ready to close your eyes. Or if you'd like to, then just experiment with keeping the eyes open, the gaze soft. Allowing awareness to inhabit your body, inhabit the space that body takes up. And don't feel that you need to direct your attention to one particular area of your body, or to focus on the breath. You might find that your attention naturally goes to the breath, and that's fine. But you can also have the attitude, okay, the mind is with the breath. What else is happening? What else is obvious? Other sensations, seeing happening, or perhaps hearing, noticing sounds, noticing sights and sensations. And if it's helpful, you might stay with one sphere of experience initially. Perhaps stay with sensation, temperature, movement within the tactile body. Or perhaps staying with where you notice sound. Sounds around in your environment, through the computer, sounds within your body.
And when the mind feels a little bit steadier or stabilized, you can open up to other senses, sense spheres. And do this from a place of ease, resting back in the body. And just noticing experiences as they arise in the present moment. Practice is very simple. It's not a lot to do, but as we become more aware, there's a lot that can be noticed. Noticing objects from different senses, objects of hearing, seeing, touch, perhaps smell and taste. Experiences through the mind sense, noticing thoughts happening, thoughts or images. How long does a thought last in the mind? As well as noticing the objects of different senses. We can also notice the relationship to those experiences. Noticing any sense of reaching out towards an experience. It's mental reaching. Let's see if it's possible to relax and settle back. Allow experiences to come to you. Receiving experiences as they arise, persist, perhaps for only a very short time, and then disappear. Notice how the mind moves from one sense object to another. From a sound to a sensation to a thought. This movement of mind is completely natural and normal. And the job of awareness is simply to accompany these movements of mind. Movements of mind attending to one experience after another. If you find that you're getting quite carried away by thoughts and stories, just recognize what's happening. It's not a problem, it's storytelling mind, thinking mind. And it can be helpful, if you find it's happening quite a bit, to just come back to a more tangible object. Let's come back to the body. Come back to noticing sounds as they arise. And in this way, mindfulness can regroup, can become a little stronger, steadier. And then once again, you can open up to sense experience through all the senses, including the mind sense. Every now and again, just dropping in the reminder to be present. Perhaps with the question, what's happening now? Training in remembering to be aware. And every now and again, perhaps checking the quality of energy or effort. Is there a sense of trying, even trying hard? Or there might be a sense of ease, relaxation, and spaciousness in the body and in the mind. And if there's something in your experience that feels unpleasant or unwanted, is it possible to have some acceptance? This is what is happening right now. Some curiosity. What's this like? What's sleepiness like in the mind, in the body? Being curious. Or dullness or aversion, whatever it is. Seeing if it's possible to connect with some degree of willingness to be with our actual experience. It's already here. We can just be with it. and the mind that's clearly knowing. And tuning into whether that clear knowing is of a more personal nature, sense of this is all happening to me. And knowing that clearly, knowing what that's like. And perhaps moments of knowing the mind that's simply aware of experiences coming and going through the different senses, moment by moment. At its simplest, we're just knowing what's happening in the present moment, in this moment. Not necessarily knowing it with a label, feeling into awareness.
Okay, so what would be lovely would be to maybe hear from some of you just about anything you noticed during that practice. Maybe just moments where you felt quite aware, present, what that was like. Something about the quality of energy or effort or something else. So I think I'm going to be relying on someone in the center to let me know if there's anybody wanting to speak in the center, and you.
I've set up a particular spot for anybody in the centre that wants to speak. You probably can't hear me actually.
I could just about hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I've set up a spot, a place with the mic by it, so if anybody wants to speak, they can come to this spot.
Great.
Might need to get a cushion.
Thank you.
I have a question, but I don't know where my hand button is.
Don't worry. Go for it, Holly.
So I find it really interesting what you were saying about how much effort we're applying to things. And I've sort of noticed at the minute, because I'm quite tired all the time, like actually how much effort I'm putting in, all the like overly amounts of effort, like making a cup of tea. It's like there's so much sort of like to things. And when we were meditating just then, I was like, oh, when you're talking about broadness in the sort of little bits we did before, how much of that is like, could surrender be used when you were talking about broadness? I just wondered if that's what you thought about.
What I thought about were those Subhuti's 3 myths and the one of self-surrender. That's what came to my mind. But I think you can, that in a way, that receptive sort of settling back. If you like, you're surrendering to the moment, you're surrendering to what's actually present. So perhaps that includes like, oh, a lot of tiredness. What's that like? So you're sort of with what's happening rather than opposing it. And I think sometimes strong energy is like a resistance or an opposing of a different type of energy. Maybe it's an opposing tiredness, but so yeah, I could see surrender working as a way to sort of rest with or be with what's happening without that oppositional type of energy. Yeah, so it can be very soft. I find a tiredness, sometimes there isn't the energy to resist. And that can be very helpful for practice, can't it? It's like, oh, I'm just going to be with what's happening because I haven't got the energy to try and get something else to happen. Can work for us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else like to say what was happening for them? We'll give it a little bit of time. It can be very simple, very simple.
I've got a question, I guess. You talked about sort of using too much energy, I think, and the symptoms of that. And I kind of worry that I use too little. So I sometimes drift for quite long periods. And so I'll have a feeling when I realise that I've gone off, I'll have a feeling that I've just been swept away. I was going for a while, seemed quite stable, but then suddenly minutes later, and this happens quite a lot to me, and I suspect it's because I'm not putting enough effort in rather than too much. And is that, can you say like what might be the symptoms of using too little effort or too little energy?
I'll come at it from a slightly different tack, which is Analayo, Bhikkhu Analayo. He says sometimes right mindfulness takes the place of right effort. So I think what I come to in this practice is not necessarily using more effort, but using more mindfulness. So, okay, coming, in a way, doing that, reminding yourself to come to the present, remembering to come. Once you're present, you don't actually need a lot of energy to be aware of what's happening. You just need to have the habit of coming to the present, of noticing what's actually happening. Sometimes it can be that we notice those drifty states, so we don't immediately try and move away from those. When you become aware that, oh, I've been drifting, what's that like? What does it feel like, that quality of mind that's drifting? Can you be aware of that, what that's like? So there's a little bit of interest. So if you like, you're building the qualities of awareness, but to the experience that's actually happening, rather than in a way thinking I've got to start from scratch and it needs to be a different experience that isn't drifty. Yeah, so I'd say first port of call would be more mindfulness, which is a type of effort. It's a quality where you are injecting a bit more energy into the mind. How does that land?
Yeah, that sounds good. So yet again, the point is to be not resisting the fact that I'm drifting, or and being curious about that as well.
Yeah. And use other tools if you like if you feel it's happening a lot and for long periods of time, then come to a more tangible object. So that might be the breath, or it might be the body, just to help help sort of stabilize yourself in the present moment a little bit, with quite a simple area of experience. Yeah, so that's an option as well.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Either anything about your experience in the meditation, and as I say, it could be very simple, or if there are any comments or questions from anything I said earlier, we can open it up to that as well.
Can I go again if no?
You can.
I'm just thinking about when you're talking, it feels like the word relax is coming into my mind, and like how much of I was on a Paramananda retreat recently, and he was basically like the whole 2 weeks was just like relax. So I'm just wondering, like, how much do you see awareness as some form of relaxing, or meditation relaxing into experiences?
Yeah, great. Sometimes I talk about relaxing into awareness, and I because I've been someone who's dealt with a lot of tension and discomfort, especially around the migraines. For me, it's been really helpful to think of relaxing into presence, relaxing into the moment. So rather than that, it's something that is almost the opposite that we have to strive into. It's like, oh, relax into being here. And it sort of makes sense to me that you relax more into inhabiting your experience of the body, but also in the mind. Yeah.
There's some like noticeable times where that is quite like a big shift, but then I suppose sometimes it feels like in meditation it's so soft, it's such a subtle sort of shift of, like you're saying, like lean back. It's like actually that might just be quite subtle, and then the whole thing sort of changes.
Yeah, and I think the more consistency of awareness, and the times when you feel like the experience is subtle, but that means that actually it's what it's saying is that the awareness is quite subtle, to be able to notice more subtle experiences. So I think there can be a sort of reciprocal relationship there between noticing subtlety, but also noticing, you can also notice that the awareness is picking up subtlety. So it's that quality of attention that's also sort of got more refined in a certain way. Yeah.
I was aware of a sense of shock at one point when you were talking about the fact that it's all there already.
Okay, I missed one word there, Anthony. So sense of
I felt a sense of shock
shock.
run through me when you said it's there already, and that kind of remembrance and of the fact that awareness and mindfulness and all the senses that are all the ingredients are there. They're just there the whole time. And how amazing that is, really.
Yeah. I think what I was pointing to in that time was the whatever we might be resisting is there already. That was partly it. I do think awareness can be there quite a lot of the time, but what we're doing is sort of encouraging it to be there more of the time, encouraging it to be there more consistently. And but that shock sounds quite good, actually. It sounds like it sort of would wake us up into presence, isn't it? So it's quite insightful in its nature. Anyone else in the shrine room like to say anything? Okay, maybe I'll just say, I said I might say something about the time. Oh, was that a unmuting? Was there anyone? Yeah.
It was just to say there wasn't anyone.
Okay, thanks, Shantika, thanks. Okay. So I'll just say a little bit about the title of the book, which reminds me, earlier Vajradevi put my blog in the chat. There's loads of stuff on the blog. There's lots of recordings. Do feel free to have a look. I think there's also a link to the book somewhere, but maybe that will come. Yeah, there we go. Great. Thank you very much. From Windhorse. So yeah, maybe I'll just say something about the title of the book, Uncontrived Mindfulness. Which is largely to do with Tejananda. It's Tejananda's fault. I do a retreat with him at Vajraloka every year, and I write a blurb for it, and the blurb one year said something about mindfulness being uncontrived. And before I knew it, the next year, Tejananda had pulled this little bit of text out of the blurb, and he'd put it as the title of the retreat. And it's been like that ever since. And so when I started the blog, it seemed natural that the blog would be Uncontrived Mindfulness, and now the book has become Uncontrived Mindfulness. So it contrasts with contrived, the mind that's contrived, or mindfulness that can feel contrived. And for me, that's when the mind is often tense, and mindfulness feels like it can feel like something that's a bit added on, or a bit sort of it's the opposite of that really sort of natural, relaxed thing. And I think most people have an experience like that at some point during their meditative career, where mindfulness just doesn't feel that relaxed or natural. So it could be contrived in that way. But also, I think there's a positive contriving, or which is more akin to cultivation. And that's what we do with these four factors of right mindfulness. We encourage the mind in a particular direction. We encourage qualities in the mind that will support a full sense of mindfulness, of awareness, the right effort, the right attitude in the mind, and remembering and reminding. So that's contrived in a more helpful sense to practice. And when we do that, at a certain point, we develop, some momentum in the mind, or momentum in the practice. So awareness, it's like becomes a stronger stream in the mind. Awareness working with right view or working with wisdom. So together, I mean, we've always got streams of stuff going on in the mind. Often it's connected with craving or aversion or delusion. But we've also, because we're practicing, we've got ethical qualities, we've got streams of ethical qualities or skillful qualities in the mind. And what we're particularly looking to do in this practice is develop the qualities of mindfulness, but also of wisdom. And at a certain point, there's enough sort of strength in those qualities that they start to work on their own. They don't need so much sort of cultivating or contriving. We start to get to a point where uncontrived mindfulness is there. Sometimes describe it as akin to riding a bike. And initially you do need to pedal, you need to put some effort in. But if you still keep pedaling once you're going, then I don't know, funny things happen with your leg. Well, that's what I find anyway. Funny things happen, and the pedals are going too fast for my feet to keep up. So we have to sort of, in a way, really be sensitive to that. At that point, our personal effort isn't needed, even in a very receptive type of effort. What's needed is to really let awareness and right view or wisdom do their jobs, because that's the awareness is much better at being aware than our collection of habits and sanskaras. So we let that quality in the mind really do its work, and the same with the wisdom or right view quality. We've cultivated them, and then it's like let them get on with it. And sometimes when there is momentum and the mindfulness is uncontrived, we can lose the feeling of there being someone there sort of doing, directing, controlling the practice, thinking about practice, and it's just going on its own. And as well as losing the feeling, we also can gain a feeling, if you like, the feeling that there isn't anyone there doing all of this, that actually there are conditions, positive conditions that are rolling through the mind and body stream. And there can be, from experiences like that, there can be a deeper understanding that it's all happening on its own, in one of those many facets, those wisdom facets I talked about. And that might be in a really simple way, might be a really simple way. Perhaps there's the experience of the breath in that moment, and we might just have the sense that this breath has never been breathed before, and know that in a deep, simple way. That's not to do with an intellectual understanding, but it's really a deepening of practice. Yeah, so uncontrived, we can also talk about unconstructed, unfabricated, or unprompted. Those are similar words that are used in the tradition. Uncontrived generally isn't used in the tradition, though I was very happy recently. Ratnaguna sent me a recent translation from someone called Christopher Stagg, and he's translated the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. So it's a Tibetan text, but in that he talks about the bliss of the uncontrived mind. So it's in there, it's in the tradition, which is very lovely. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks everyone for coming and for participating, and I'm going to hand back to Khemasiri.